The following is an official lore video of the Dark Diaspora universe, a journey in world-building project.
When the local hermit, Jeremiah, appeared outside the walls of the settlement years after his self-imposed exile, he brought with him a message of hope. For too long had the people of the cavernous gray moonlet of Egolia suffered from the constant threat of the Arania, brown, dog-sized spider monstrosities with a cruel penchant for attacking settlers in swarms and feasting upon their paralyzed yet still living bodies. When Jeremiah returned claiming prophetic visions and ancient powers, there were many who rejected his fanciful declaration. Yet, when he demonstrated his abilities, causing an attacking swarm to flee with his mere presence, this apparent miracle all but guaranteed his elevation. Soon, the local executive officer was overthrown by an angry mob, fueled by equal parts fear and hope. And from the ashes of the former regime rose Jeremiah, declared High Lord of Egolia by acclamation, heralding a period of hope and salvation. The prophet initially proved good to his word, with his elaborate druidic spells, complete with crude tapestries of woven local fibers, seemingly empowering the city walls themselves with the magics to repel the blighted monstrosities. His success saw Jeremiah take on an almost messianic persona, and soon his very presence was met with adoration and devotion. A cult quickly coalesced around the High Lord, celebrating his triumphs, preaching his truth, and praising his divinity. Jeremiah's early reign was not without its excesses, with the wives and daughters of many settlers forming something of a debauched harem, while a sizable share of the colony's meager resources were siphoned away to maintain the prophet's comfort. Most turned a blind eye to this lust and gluttony, however, overcome by zealotry and faithfulness. So absolute was the devotion of the people to Jeremiah that when a small Red Order fleet made landfall on the moonlet to suppress this burgeoning local faith, the novices and deacons of the Tarvan Covenant were met in battle with a righteous fury that even they could not match. The slaughter that ensued was a bloody victory, yet it was not without its impact, and soon Jeremiah's once compassionate homilies were replaced by unhinged and vitriolic rants against the unseen threats and enemies. Well-meaning questions on how Jeremiah prevented the scourge from approaching the city walls, once deftly parried by the prophet, were now met with suspicion, enmity, and even claims of treason and heresy. Soon the authority of the prophet began to unravel. Heavy-handed actions to suppress growing discontent simply fueled more bitterness and anger, just as assaults against devotees reaffirmed the prophet's growing oppression. And so, it proved inevitable that a particularly cruel execution of an innocent young woman, meant to strike fear in the hearts of a rebellious people, instead triggered a bloody, violent, and destructive riot. Brutalized, starving, and angry people raged through the streets that night, hunting down and ripping apart every devotee they could find. Buildings were ransacked and destroyed, fires lit, and blood stained the streets as the mob quickly converged on the comparatively outlandish abode of the prophet. Cornering the prophet, any fears of his divinity and supernatural powers were blinded by the pure fury of the crowd, and the once savior was soon dragged onto the street where he was stabbed, disemboweled, quartered, and his remains were set alight. As morning broke, the crackling fires of broken buildings still smoldering were the only sounds that disturbed the eerie silence. The orgy of violence and bloodlust that had ushered the fall of the false prophet was spent, and the residents wandered aimlessly in the streets in shock and quiet reverie. Yet, the silence was soon broken by the sound of skittering, The initial distant echo gave way to a thunderous stampede as thousands of Aurania emerged from the caves and rolled over the burnt and broken city walls and into the streets like a wave of legs and fangs. For days following the attack, the sounds of screams and torturous pain filled the ruins of the settlement, as the surviving residents were consumed alive. None would ever understand their folly, for none knew the secret that Jeremiah had discovered within the caves. For as the Aurania feasted on human flesh, the charred and scorched tapestries that adorned the city walls, the very ones placed by Jeremiah during his spell-casting facade, waved gently in the breeze. Here, flame having utterly destroyed the rare cave-dwelling root fibers of the weaves, and with them, their formidable, repelling qualities.